Let's talk a bit about Indiegogo. So if you don't know who I am, my name's Sal. I run the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel, also the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast, which you can find in iTunes. I've written about crowdfunding for a really long time now. I have a blog. I also have 4 books I've written about crowdfunding. And this is all just to say that I've seen a lot of different things. I've seen a lot of different campaigns, and I want to share that information and that knowledge with you. If you're going into your very first campaign here, it's anxiety producing, it's nerve wracking, there's a lot of new terminology to know. You sort of have to figure out this entire new industry. And I want to share these things with you, but I also want to give you an overview. I want to give you a good idea of how the Indiegogo crowdfunding platform works. I want to show you and sort of roll back the screen, if you will, and talk a bit about the marketplace. Talk a bit about the community, talk about some of the differences between Indiegogo and its competitor, Kickstarter. So Kickstarter is the other behemoth in the room. Indiegogo and Kickstarter are pretty much the 2 giants that command most of the attention in the crowdfunding industry. On Indiegogo, over $1 billion has been funded, and that is insane. So we're gonna get a bit into that and also how they differ. So the first thing I wanna sort of clue you into are the various checklist items when it comes to the functionality of Indiegogo. So we're gonna go into that and then talk a little bit about the community. So first of all, in terms of the functionality of Indiegogo, there are the equity crowdfunding platform, there is generosity, there is Indiegogo, the core crowdfunding platform, there is Indiegogo in demand, and then a bunch of other stuff that basically goes into making you have a more successful campaign. So in terms of the equity crowdfunding platform, this is relatively new. You can now raise money for a startup on Indiegogo. You can attract investors, you can attract angel investors who are going to put money into your startup company in exchange for equity. This is a newer feature of Indiegogo. Number 2, you have generosity. So Indiegogo's generosity platform is kind of like GoFundMe. You can use it to raise money for things like memorial funds. You can use it to raise money for a charity, for a nonprofit, for if you have an emergency, a medical emergency of some kind, for travel-related costs. This is what you would use generosity for. Then of course, you have the core platform, Indiegogo itself. And Indiegogo itself has a lot of different categories that comprise the platform. So like film, theater, technology, design, all these different types of projects can raise money on Indiegogo. And I think a really big difference here being that historically, Indiegogo has been much more of an open platform. They've been far more open to all the different projects and ideas under the sun. They're not as selective as Kickstarter, and that's obviously a pro and a con. A pro being that if you can't for some reason raise money on Kickstarter, you can go on Indiegogo. And now they still do have guidelines and rules and all that kind of stuff, but chances are you're going to be able to raise money for whatever it is that you want on Indiegogo, so that's a massive pro. The con being, sometimes we'll see projects that are raising money and are very controversial in nature. So we might see some media stories about those types of projects. So aside from the actual Indiegogo platform, we then have Indiegogo in demand. So Indiegogo in demand, this is a sort of an after crowdfunding platform. So once you raise money via crowdfunding, you've collected a bunch of funding, you've done everything right, you've successfully raised money on Indiegogo, you can continue to leverage the success that you've built up to continue to build that momentum with the Indiegogo in demand program. And what this allows you to do is, it allows you to continue to accept pledges, to continue to raise money on Indiegogo. This is after the campaign has finished. So it's really powerful. It sort of removes that our campaign just ended and now we have to transition into e-commerce. We have to figure all that stuff out. You can instead set up an Indiegogo in-demand campaign and keep collecting orders from your backers and customers. And actually, there are a lot of campaigns on Kickstarter that after a successful Kickstarter campaign, they then go on Indiegogo in demand and continue to raise money there. So this is one of the more powerful aspects of the platform. Now, aside from these major distinctions that I'm sort of pointing out here, there have some other things, like there is an Indiegogo secret perk. This is sort of an option where if you want to give exclusive select access to some people, you want to allow them to have access to a secret perk that only they can gain access to if they go through this unique link. You can do that on Indiegogo. Some other things that you can do affiliate marketing. And finally, I think the major thing to be said about the actual Indiegogo platform is the funding options. So in terms of the funding options, you think of Kickstarter. Kickstarter is what they call an all or nothing crowdfunding platform. So an all or nothing crowdfunding platform, if you have a $10,000 goal, you're trying to raise $10,000, you have to meet or exceed that fundraising amount in order for you to keep the money that's been raised. If you only raise $9,000, you can't actually keep all of that money that you've been working hard to accumulate. You can't keep it. So on Kickstarter, you have to either meet or exceed your fundraising goal. So in Indiegogo, it works a little bit differently. They have both a fixed funding campaign and a flexible funding campaign. So a fixed funding campaign is that it is all or nothing. It is very similar to Kickstarter. You take a 5% fee and you have to meet or exceed your fundraising goal to be able to keep the money that you've raised. But they also have a flexible funding option. So flexible funding is basically saying that if you don't hit your goal, and you fall short of your goal, you can still keep the money that you've raised on Indiegogo. So there are various reasons why you might want to go with fixed funding over flexible funding, keep what you raise over all or nothing kind of crowdfunding. There's a reason why you might want to choose one of these different models, but that's quite frankly too much for this video. It's beyond the scope of this video, but I do talk about that in other blog posts and information that I put out there. So that's one of the major differences between Indiegogo and a lot of other crowdfunding platforms is the core functionality and the various components of their crowdfunding platform, from generosity, in-demand, equity, the core Indiegogo platform. This is one of the big differences of Indiegogo as a platform. But aside from that, there are some other here that I want to point out. So for example, the actual community of Indiegogo. Now, Indiegogo, from all the different guests that I've interviewed, the number one thing that every single guest has had to say about Indiegogo is that they have a stellar team there. They have a really good customer support team at Indiegogo, and that actually they've had team members reach out to them in the preparation stages of their campaign. They're just laying the groundwork. They're just getting ready to launch. They had members of the Indiegogo team reach out to them and ask, hey, do you need any help? Do you have any questions? All that kind of stuff. They sort of held their hand a little bit. And the people I've talked with have really liked that. And it was actually for them the decision factor that made them want to launch on Indiegogo aside from their competitor, Kickstarter. So first of all, Indiegogo is a lot more responsive and a lot more hand-holding when it comes to as a platform. Historically, Kickstarter has been a bit more closed off. It's been harder to reach them. It's been harder to get a hold of like an actual person. So Kickstarter differs in that way, and Indiegogo has a bit more of a better team community kind of feel, and that's something that I think is a big distinction here. In addition, talking about the actual platform, I would be remiss if I didn't say that the community on Indiegogo of backers and of creators and entrepreneurs is actually much smaller than that of Kickstarter. It's not as big, it's not as popular of a platform. And that's clear, that's factual. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. Because on Kickstarter, while yes, it is popular, there are a lot of backers who also are gonna have a lot of competition. On Indiegogo, you're not gonna have as much competition, so it's easier to stand out. There is the same kind of community feel, same kind of backer community there on Indiegogo. It's just not as large as Kickstarter. So that's something also to keep in mind as you're launching your very first crowdfunding campaign. Now that being said, the actual community of Indiegogo, talking about the platform and getting funded and such, I think another major difference here is the fact that Indiegogo operates based on the go-go factor algorithm. So the go-go factor algorithm is actually what decides whether or not a project is trending in Indiegogo. So you can imagine if you're looking to do well, rope in backers and get funded, you want to know about the go-go factor algorithm. You don't want to know how to trend well in the actual platform. This is something really important when explaining how Indiegogo works. So this algorithm is going to determine if you get into a newsletter that Indiegogo sends out, if you're going to be featured on the homepage, if you're going to be featured well in the category that you launch in. This decides a lot of the major stuff when it comes to the crowdfunding platform. And the number one thing that you should know is that you absolutely must bring your crowd to Indiegogo. You have to jumpstart the campaign. You have to make sure there is some initial funding and activity. Because if there isn't, there is no way that Indiegogo is going to feature you. It has to be a win-win. If they're featuring you, you have to already be doing a little bit well. You have to already be getting some traction. So it's something you need to know going into your campaign launch. If you don't know that, you're gonna be like every other single campaigner out there that I talk with, where they launch the campaign and it's just like crickets. There isn't any kind of response. And they're like, what do I do? They try to get the word out. They start to panic. They then come to me and are like, Sal, help me with my campaign. I don't know what to do. You want to prepare for the launch ahead of time. And this is sort of the last thing that I'm going to be talking about in terms of how crowdfunding works, how fundraising works on Indiegogo. The common perception is, okay, I see all of these different campaigns being funded on Indiegogo. They're doing really well. Look at this guy is raising 6 figures. This other person has raised 7 figures. That's insane. I want to do the same thing. So you launch a campaign. What you don't see though is what's behind the scenes. You don't see all the legwork that has gone in to make that event happen. And that's all in the pre-launch. That is all in the marketing activity that's leading up to this stellar launch. It's all planned. These people already have built a crowd. They've already built a pre-launch email list. They already know how they're gonna reach out to the media. They've baked everything in ahead of time. And you have to do the same thing. You have to do the same thing if you want to stand any kind of chance of success when it comes to raising money on Indiegogo. Now, once you do that, once you do have that initial surge, once you have that initial trajectory that's just going up and skyrocketing, you then start to see people coming in, you then start to see some media attention, you then start to see social shares, you start to see strangers coming and backing your crowdfunding campaign. But until you do that, it's gonna be mainly based off of the fire that you ignite yourself with your marketing. So you're going to want to plan for that. And it's a lot to say. I know that's very difficult to wrap your head around, but that's one of the reasons why I urge you, take a second to not only thumbs up this video, but also subscribe to this channel. I put out videos regularly on marketing, on getting backers, on how to trend well, on all this kind of stuff that you need to take into account if you want to get funded. So come here, subscribe to this channel. Also, if you want more premium stuff, I'll include a link down below to a course that I put together, sharing things I've never shared before on this channel, in my podcast, on my blog posts, proven strategies that will work to get you backers. If you want to do well with crowdfunding, you have to educate yourself. You can't just rely on hiring an outside agency. You can't just rely on hoping someone else is going to do it for you, or that magically you're going to get funded. You really have to take the reins. You have to take responsibility. You have to educate yourself, and you have to go in knowing how the system works, knowing how to get attention, knowing how to get backers, all these different things that I talk about in the course down below, and also in some of my other stuff, like my books, the Kickstarter launch formula, and a lot of the other content I put out on this YouTube channel. So thank you so much if you decided to subscribe to this. I'm gonna be putting out a lot of cool new videos in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. But lastly, my name is Sal. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. I can't say that I'm gonna get to everyone, but I definitely read every single comment, and when I can, I try to hop in there and answer some of those questions and comments that I get. So I really appreciate it for watching this video and also becoming one of my subscribers.